My brother promised he'd always protect me, but he sold me for his own freedom. I stayed silent for years, but then I returned as his judge. He used to hold my hand when I was scared of the dark. He used to tell me, as long as I'm alive, no one will ever hurt you. I believed him. Because back then, my brother Arav was my world. We were orphans by fate, raised by our strict but wealthy uncle in a house where emotions were punishable and obedience was currency. I was 5 when our parents died in a car crash, and Arav was 10. That night, as the house filled with relatives and whispers, it was Arav who sat beside me, dried my tears, and said, "I'm your father now. I'll protect you forever." That promise became the anchor of my life. Our uncle, Mr. Rashveer Mehta, was powerful and cold-hearted. He ran a chain of businesses and had no time for affection. I wasn't allowed to play outside or laugh too loudly. But Arav always shielded me, sneaking me sweets, distracting our uncle when I made mistakes, helping me hide when I cried. He was more than a brother. He was my hero. As years passed, I grew into a quiet, bookish teenager. Arav, though, changed. He began spending more time with our uncle's business managers. He started talking about money, power, and carving his own path. I didn't understand it then, but I could feel it, the distance, the shift. But even through the change, he still checked on me at night. Still reminded me, "You're safe, as long as I'm here." So when our uncle announced one day that he had arranged a business deal involving me, I ran to Arav in panic. He was sitting in his room, dressed sharply, eyes glued to his phone. "He wants me to marry a business associate's son," I said, voice trembling. "He said it'll help the family gain influence." Arav stood silently. Too silent. I waited for him to explode, to protect me like always. Instead, he said, "Maybe it's not so bad." I blinked. "What?" He avoided my gaze. "Sometimes, we have to do things we don't like. For the family." I felt something inside me collapse. That night, I cried alone, not because my uncle had betrayed me, but because the only person I trusted had turned his back on me. And I didn't know then that this was just the beginning. After that night, something in Arav shifted permanently. His hugs disappeared. His gaze became distant. His words became practiced. Uncle had always been a controlling man, but I never imagined he'd go as far as he did. One morning, I was told to pack my things. No explanations. No kindness. 2 servants escorted me out like I was diseased. I kept asking, "Where are we going?" Arav will never allow this. But when we reached the gates of a secluded facility in the hills, I froze. It was a private mental health center. I screamed. I cried. I told them I wasn't mad, that I was being forced. But no one listened, because the paperwork was signed by Arav. I remember the way the head nurse looked at me and said, "Your brother said you've been unstable since your parents' death, that you need help and peace." I stopped breathing. I demanded to call him, but they wouldn't let me. I begged. I banged on doors. I sat in corners shaking, and he never came. Days turned into weeks. I was sedated, monitored, labeled. Every day, I hoped he'd walk in and say, "It was a mistake. I'm taking you home." He never did. Instead, from newspaper clippings and overheard TV reports, I saw a different truth. Arav Mehta was rising. He had taken over one of Uncle Rashveer's companies. Then, too, he was photographed at press conferences, shaking hands with ministers, launching new ventures. The media praised his business acumen. No one knew his sister had been quietly erased. I was stripped of identity, declared mentally unfit, because Arav had signed the documents that made it all legal. Years passed. My voice became quieter, my mind sharper. I learned how to appear calm, how to nod when spoken to, how to be the perfect patient, because I had a plan. I wasn't going to die forgotten in that place. I was going to walk out one day, not as a victim, but as the woman who would destroy the man who used her pain as currency. The day I escaped wasn't a dramatic breakout. It was precise, calculated, quiet. For 3 years, I had played the part of the obedient, healing sister. I took the pills they gave me, but only pretended to swallow. I answered their questions just right. I painted, I journaled, I smiled. Inside, I was burning. Then one morning, during a storm, a power outage hit the facility. Security systems flickered. Cameras died. The staff panicked, and I walked out the back gate dressed in a nurse's old coat, a clipboard in my hand, and a fire in my heart. No one followed. I took a bus down from the hills. I didn't have a phone. No ID. No money. I was just a woman with hollow eyes and a memory full of betrayal. I slept at train stations, lived on tap water and scraps. But I was free. And freedom, even when cold, even when painful, tastes better than silence. I made it to the city. Not to our old mansion. That chapter was dead. I found work at a local cafe as a cleaner. The owner, a kind woman named Reshma Andy, took me in after noticing how I'd shiver at loud noises and avoid mirrors. She never asked for my past. She just gave me space to breathe. And in that space, I began to grow. I started reading again, books on entrepreneurship, finance, digital marketing. I borrowed a second-hand laptop and spent nights learning everything from scratch. My mind was a weapon now, and I was sharpening it every day. Soon, I started a tiny online store, just me and a few handmade products I created in the back of the cafe. I called it Revive, because that's what I was doing. Reviving. At first, only a few people bought from me, but I poured every rupee into better material, packaging, and branding. I used free tools, promoted on forums, posted every day. In 1 year, my shop went viral. People loved my story, the woman who had nothing, but created beauty from pain. Influencers promoted my work. A magazine featured me as the face of quiet strength. They didn't know who I really was. Yet, meanwhile, I watched Arav rise higher. Now the face of a multi-million-dollar empire. Invited to speak at universities. Winning awards. Celebrated for being a self-made visionary. Self-made? No. He was made from my silence. My exile. My erasure. But I had returned. And the world was about to know exactly who I was. It was poetic, really. Arav had been invited to speak at an international leadership summit, the keynote speaker, no less. His face was plastered across banners and billboards. From loss to legacy, Arav met his journey through family, failure, and fortune. I bought a front row ticket. No one recognized me. The years had changed my face, but more importantly, they had changed my spirit. Gone was the girl with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. What sat in that chair was a woman cloaked in quiet power, observant, composed, and waiting. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. And then he walked onto the stage. My brother. My betrayer. He stood tall in a tailored suit with that same fake sincerity he wore the day he told me, "Maybe it's not so bad." The audience clapped as he smiled and began his story. He spoke about rising from tragedy, about how he lost his parents young and had to protect his little sister. He even paused, pretended to get emotional, and added, "There was a time when I had to make painful sacrifices for my family's safety. But those sacrifices shaped me." Sacrifices? I clenched my jaw. The woman next to me whispered, "He's so inspiring." I nearly laughed. He talked about the mental health crisis, about resilience, about supporting those who struggle silently. He never once mentioned that he put his own sister into that silence. And as the crowd gave him a standing ovation, I remained seated, smiling, because I knew what they didn't. I wasn't here to interrupt him. I wasn't here to expose him, not yet. I was here to remind myself who he was pretending to be, so I could tear that image apart piece by piece. When the Q&A session started, audience members lined up to ask questions. I didn't step up. I had no question, only an answer. Because backstage, waiting in the media lounge, was a journalist, one who had been researching a hidden sibling connected to the Meta legacy. And tonight, I would give her my story. Not to go viral, not to become famous, but to let the first crack form in the glass house my brother had built on lies. The journalist's name was Mira. Young, sharp, and hungry for truth, but not the sensational kind. The quiet kind. The kind that destroyed reputations not with shouting, but with facts. She had already suspected there was more to Arav Mehta's perfect story. He speaks so passionately about sacrifice, she said. But no one has ever seen his sister. Not a single photo. Not a mention in any public record. I handed her a single envelope. Inside were photocopies of the original psychiatric commitment papers, signed by Arav Mehta. There were photographs of the facility, of me, of medical records I had collected quietly over the years. I don't need pity, I told her. I need truth. Just let the world decide what kind of man he really is. Mira nodded slowly, realizing the weight of what I'd handed her. This could destroy him, she said. I looked her in the eye. No. This will reveal him. 2 weeks later, the article dropped. The sister in the shadows. The truth behind Arav Mehta's rise to power. The internet exploded. Social media was flooded with outrage, curiosity, disbelief. Some defended him. Others demanded answers. Hashtags like #medleys and #justice for her trended for days. I watched in silence as sponsors pulled out of his upcoming events. Universities canceled his speeches. Interviews were postponed. Stock in his companies dipped. Investors hesitated. And yet, he didn't respond. Because he didn't know how to. He thought I had died in silence. He never imagined I'd return armed with everything he once took from me. My voice, my strength, my truth. One evening, his assistant called my office. I'm sorry to disturb you, ma'am, he said nervously. Mr. Arav Mehta would like to request a private meeting. I paused. Looked out my office window, where the name Revive Enterprises glowed proudly on the building across the street. And I said, tell him, I don't do private anymore. It was a rainy evening, the kind that made everything seem slower, heavier. I was in my office, sipping warm tea, reviewing a partnership proposal with an international wellness brand when my secretary buzzed in. There's someone downstairs. He doesn't have an appointment. Says his name is Arav Mehta. My hand froze on the pen. Arav. Here. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I put the pen down, closed the file, and stood up. Let him in. I waited behind the tall glass walls of my office. It was a space I had built with care, modern, minimal, silent. The walls were lined with the very products I had created during my rebirth. The lighting was soft but strong. Every inch of it screamed power, not loud, not vulgar, but earned. And then the door opened. There he stood. My brother. Older, a little thinner. The confident glint in his eyes was gone, replaced by uncertainty. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. Maybe both. Aisha, he whispered, stepping inside like a stranger walking into a museum. I wasn't sure you'd see me. I almost didn't, I said simply. He looked around, clearly taken aback by the transformation. You built all this? No, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I rebuilt myself. That's different. He lowered his gaze. I know what you must think of me, he said. I made terrible decisions. I was young. Pressured. Uncle. Don't you dare, I cut in sharply. Don't you dare say it was him. You signed those papers. You let them take me. You watched me disappear and never asked where I went. I thought they were helping you. I didn't know. Don't lie. My voice was steady. Cold. You knew exactly what you were doing. He looked like he might cry. But I didn't care. He walked over slowly and sat down across from me, without invitation. I wasn't brave. That's the truth. I took the easy way out. They offered me the company, the name, the freedom, in exchange for you. And I took it. I stared at him. There it was. The confession. Too little. Too late. I thought you were gone, he whispered. And then, the article. The interviews. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to face you. So why are you here? I asked. To say I'm sorry. The silence that followed was heavy. Sorry? I echoed. Do you think sorry patches over 3 years of silence? Over being locked away? Over being erased? No, he said, almost instantly. I know it doesn't. I came here to say it not expecting forgiveness. Just because it needed to be said. I looked at him for a long time. This was the same brother who used to protect me from monsters under the bed. Who used to cover for me when I broke a vase. Who promised, with tear-filled eyes at age 10, that he'd never let anyone hurt me. But he had. Worse, he had delivered me to the very hands I was meant to be protected from. You took the easy road, Arav, I said. But look where it brought you. You've lost your credibility. Your partners are leaving. Your name is stained. I know, he whispered. And I deserve it. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the lights of the city dance in the rain. Do you know what kept me alive in that place? I asked softly. He didn't answer. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was the hope that someday, I'd rise high enough that you would have to look up just to see me again. I turned back toward him. And now that day has come. His voice cracked. I don't want anything. Not money. Not help. I just want to know. Is there anything left in your heart for me? Anything at all? I walked slowly toward my desk, opened a drawer, and took out a folded piece of paper. It was the same psychiatric admission form. His signature still visible at the bottom. I placed it gently in front of him. There is one thing, I said. He looked up. Take that, I continued. Frame it. Hang it in your office. And every time someone praises you for your success, look at that signature. And remember what you traded it for. He swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he reached for the paper, not to take it, but to hold it like it might burn him. I'll keep it, he said finally. Not as pride, but as punishment. I nodded once. Then I walked to the door and opened it. We're done here. He stood. Stiffly. Broken. But before leaving, he turned one last time and said quietly, You are always stronger than me. And then he walked out. I watched him disappear into the elevator. I didn't cry. Because this wasn't grief anymore. This was closure. He would go back to a life filled with shadows. I would move forward into a world full of light. And for the first time since I was a child, I felt free. The invitation arrived in a crisp black envelope, sealed with gold wax and a silver ribbon. I almost laughed when I opened it. You are cordially invited to the National Entrepreneur Excellence Awards. Mr. Arav Mehta is nominated for Business Leader of the Year. Of course he was. Even after the scandal, even after the whispers, he was trying to claw his way back. To repair what could not be undone. I wasn't surprised. Arav had always been good at survival, even if it meant stepping on the bones of the people who once loved him. But what caught my attention was the final line of the card. You have been nominated for Emerging Businesswoman of the Year, Aisha Khan, founder and CEO of Revive Enterprises. That part? That stunned me. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at my name, not hidden in a hospital file, not buried in silence, but printed in gold. Celebrated. Seen. It felt like the world was finally catching up to what I had become. The night of the awards show, I wore deep maroon, bold, unapologetic, regal. I didn't wear diamonds. I didn't need to. Confidence was the sharpest jewel I carried. As I entered the venue, photographers turned, flashes lit up, and whispers followed. That's her. The one from the story. She's nominated too, right? I sat at a table near the stage, directly across from Arav. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. His eyes met mine for a brief second. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I just nodded once, like a queen acknowledging a fallen knight. The evening moved fast. Speeches, laughter, performances. Then came the big announcement. And now, the winner of Business Leader of the Year. A pause. This year, the jury has decided not to award this category. Gasps. Murmurs. Confusion. Arov's name hung in the air like a balloon that had been popped mid-flight. The host continued. Instead, for the first time, we're presenting a new honor, the Phoenix Award, for someone who rose from adversity and built something remarkable. And that award goes to... The spotlight swung. Aisha Khan. I stood slowly. The applause roared. People stood. Some clapped. Some cried. I walked toward the stage, not with haste or pride, but with peace. Because I wasn't there to defeat anyone. I was there to show the world that he couldn't bury me, no matter how deep the pit had been. The stage lights were warm. The applause thundered. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat. I stood behind the mic, looking out at the audience. Industry leaders, celebrities, politicians, all now focused on me. On the woman who was once discarded, silenced, erased. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I looked at the crowd, took a deep breath, and spoke from the core of everything I had lived through. They told me I was broken, that I was a burden, that I was better off invisible. And for a while, I believed them. But the thing about being buried is that sometimes you're not being destroyed. You're being planted. The room held its breath. This award is not about success. It's about survival. It's about the quiet strength of starting again when the world forgets you. It's about reclaiming your name, your voice, your place. I paused. And then I said the one thing that made my brother shift in his chair. And it's about never letting betrayal define who you become, because your story doesn't end where someone else abandons you. It begins where you choose to rise. Silence. Then a standing ovation. I saw him, Arav, still seated, clapping slowly, eyes downcast. Not in anger. Not in shame. In acceptance. He knew. This stage was no longer his. It never had been. Later that night, after the event ended, I stepped out onto the balcony of the hotel suite they had offered me. The city glowed beneath. I felt light, like I'd been carrying bricks for years and had finally dropped them all. Behind me, someone stepped out. It was him. Arav. We stood side by side for a moment, not saying anything. Then he said softly, "You did it." "I had to," I replied. No one else was coming. He looked at me, eyes glistening. "I never deserved to be called your brother." I turned toward him, calm and final. "You didn't." But I still rose. "And that's what matters now." He nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and left, walking back into the darkness of the hall behind us, into a world where I no longer existed for him. And I turned back to the city, to the future, to the peace I had carved with my own hands. No rage. No revenge left. Just power. Just truth. Just me. Because the past had tried to bury me. But I became the judge of the very man who signed me away. And in doing so, I set myself free.